I'd love to talk to you more about the pre-production process.
You know, it's just like all those things you need to line them up before you get there.
Production, boots on the ground kind of stuff.
Camera position, lenses being used, how we want the shots to look, how we want the edits to look.
Post-production.
Oh man, we're giving out all the secrets.
Yeah, trade
Okay.
secrets. And I have to ask, how was it meeting Jason Kelce?
It was great. Complete Florida dad mode vacation. Like it was.
Hello and welcome to Final, your exclusive behind-the-scenes look at just what goes into running a modern media agency. I'm your host, Connor Aidan, and today we're talking all about the anatomy of a sports media shoot, from pre-production all the way through post, and using some of our recent work as examples. We'll be hearing from our head of Production Avalon all about the pre-production for NHL All-Star's incredible Ice Throne, and then our producer Drew about the production processes and being on set for NFLPA Pro Bowl. And finally, our post-production supervisor Ethan on how to best handle editing. That being said, let's get into the show. And now we're with Avalon Koenig, our head of production. Avalon, I'd love to talk to you more about the pre-production process. And I know we go on a lot of media days, but I would love to explain, what is a media day?
A media day is oftentimes a day where they get all the players from either one team or all the leagues or anything in one place on one day. So it's an opportunity to get a ton of media with all the players that you normally don't have access to.
And it's like booths or stations with media?
Stations, yeah. So like NBC will have a station. They'll hire a production company like us to have a station. You know, their own team or their own league will have their own station. There'll be a social station. Fox will have a station. So yeah, there's just a ton of stations. It's typically in an arena is where they have it because there's so many rooms and they're down on the floor and it's a big event.
Awesome. And I would love to talk specifically about NHL All-Star because that was a media day, right?
Yeah, that one was actually a red carpet, which is kind of, I don't know.
What's a red carpet?
Yeah, a red carpet, which they do a lot of, it's kind of media day red carpet, but there is a literal red carpet. So like before the players walk the red carpet, they'll come through a few stations, and like our station could be one of them. But unlike a typical media day where they're like in their outfits and prepping for like content that would go up on the game board, this is like an all-star event. So they're in suits and ties, and there's fans there, and they're signing stuff. And so it's more fun for them, I think, too, than like a normal media day because it's shorter and it's very fan-based. But then they can also have activations like something that we would do where we have like a photo op or a video op to do.
Well, I would love to talk about pre-production for this NHL All-Star, but can you explain, like, what did they even come wanting to do? Yeah,
NHL specifically, we work with them all the time, so we're pretty familiar with like the kind of vibe they like, which is like kind of GQ, higher looking, showing off the players' personalities and clothes and stuff like that. So we kind of already knew that, and they just want a photo station or a video station. So we pitched a ton of ideas that just look really cool. It's kind of just about the look. Like there's no talking, there's no prompts, there's no concepts or anything. It's just, does it look really cool on camera? Which is a fun prompt to have. So we sent them a bunch of ideas.
Yeah, so I'd love to talk about that internally, because I know we do a ton of brainstorming. So can you talk to me a little bit about, okay, we get a project, where do we go from there as Fresh Tape?
Yeah. So after we have like a meeting with the client, which again, we're kind of like, what do you want? You know, is there a theme? Like the questions we kind of ask them is like, is there a theme you want us to stick to? What's the footprint that we have? Do you have a budget? Because that obviously informs like what we can do. What will the players be wearing? Will they be in skates? Will they be in outfits, or will they be in suits and ties, or will they be in a t-shirt and sweatpants? We've also gotten that too. So you have to like match the set. So once we get that information, we have a team brainstorm. And then like, if I had that meeting with the client, I'll say to the team, hey guys, here's the information. And then we all hopefully have prepped a little bit, but even if we haven't, we all kind of sit on our computers. We get on Pinterest is one of our favorites. And we kind of drop ideas, like both visual ideas, and sometimes it's more of an abstract idea. Like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if this was that? Or we just drop a literal picture of something and like, this is cool. Like, how could we make it our own? So once we have all those ideas, then we put it in a deck. Our design team makes an awesome deck with like an explanation for everything and how we would like make it our own. Like we're not making custom mocks yet or anything. It's just kind of a mood board. Then we send it to the client and then they give us, hey, I like this, this, and this. Hopefully, you know, if you you just get one idea back and then we can really dive in. But oftentimes they want to see like 3 ideas or 2 ideas. And from there, we'll start coming up with numbers, like what does this actually cost? and Audrey will start doing mocks of like, what will it actually look like with our branding, their branding, you know, whatever the custom parts of it is.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's how it gets made.
Yeah. I would love to break that down a little bit because I know you talked about a few sections.
Yes.
So the pitch deck, it's so important, right?
Yeah.
So when we are deciding, first off, can you explain a little bit more about like what's the purpose of having a pitch deck? Why not just like send this as bullet points in the list?
Totally. Which we used to do. Like I think back in the day, like we didn't have pitch decks. We didn't have a team to like make pitch decks. And you just can't, if you don't have a pitch deck, like you can't visualize it. It's hard, you know, it could be in your brain. I mean, everybody's had the experience of like, wouldn't it be cool if you took this wall and then put these things on it? And then, you know, you're
and you're like,
what?
Things?
Yeah, you're like, I don't see it. No, thank you. That's
Yeah.
kind of what would happen is they'd be like, no, thank you. So a pitch deck hopefully puts your ideas on paper more for the client to actually see like, oh, here's an example. Or sometimes we've done something like it before. Like we'd already done an ice throne. So we show them our ice throne that we have done. You know, that was in the pitch deck of like, this is ours. You can link it to a video so you can show a little bit more concepting. Like what would this actually look like? But also like a blurb is good to have too. So you can make the blurb custom, you know, like this box over here is pink, but we would do it blue with an NHL logo in the back. You can write all that out. So you can write it out and then they get a visual and all of a sudden they can like hopefully see the idea more. And obviously like the branding and the effort that you put into it just matters for clients. Like if you're just sending bullet points, it's like, did you do any work on this? You know? So we're really thinking about it. It goes through multiple departments. You know, they kind of feel like effort was put in because it was. So that's the importance of a pitch deck for sure. It's like the visual with the concept is just much more concrete that way.
And so then you send the pitch deck, maybe the clients are excited about one or a few ideas, and then this budget comes in, which I know is another huge step in pre-production. Can you talk a little bit about how do you even go about making the budget? How do you decide what to include in it? And we can even talk specifically about this NHL All-Star one.
Yeah, I mean, it depends obviously with the shoot. When we do just a set fabrication, it's easier because you don't have to factor in staffing and we do them all the time. So we kind of have a template for it of like, okay, a set fabrication cost. We kind of know we have some ideas of what that cost would be. But then there's pre-production hours, which is like what our team basically puts in to get this thing across the finish line. So Audrey making mocks or Audrey's reaching out to fabricators. You know, I'm figuring out logistics for the, you know, from the client of like load-in information. Just everything that goes on before you get there has to be clocked and has to be charged. So there's pre-production hours on there. There might be post-production hours if we're doing post. This project we didn't. NHL has a cool partnership where they use their own staff to capture and do the post. So it's less budget on our side, which is nice for them. It's just kind of the set build and then a producer. So then, you're thinking about staffing, like who's going. So we have day rates for like, I'm going to go, like there's a half day of travel, then there's a full day, and then there's a half day travel back. There's flights, there's food, there's cars, there's gear, there's lighting equipment, there's shipping information, there's baggage fees, there's mock
many
fees,
little things.
Design fees. I mean, all these things that go into making the project. It's mostly like logistics and then like how much work do you have to do before and how much work do you have to do after, and that's your budget.
And you mentioned it just now, but you know, on a lot of these shoots, we're assembling a crew. How do you decide like who am I gonna choose for this?
It's the fun part.
Yeah.
So for NHL, we didn't have that because they use their own people, but it comes down to location. That's like the first thing we look at. So if we're in a major market, it's a lot easier. We have people there, or we have people that are on our list that we want to work with. If you're in a smaller market, it's a little more difficult. So if you're in a place like LA or New York, like I have my go-to people that I love and I've worked with before. And I'll reach out to them, just text, like I have their numbers. I'm like, hey, are you available? Are you interested? Or if I feel like using someone new, which sometimes I do, depending on the project, I'm like, oh, this would be fun to like try somebody new. I often save, like in Instagram, I save people like in categories like gaffers and grips and DPs, like more the higher level roles rather than like if it's a run and gun videographer, I'm like, I know people for that, but like a DP or people who like we really want to light this like much bigger set or multiple sets, like I'm going to want to get somebody who has more experience. So we have like lists of people that we want to work with. So you can reach out to them and see if they're available. What's their rate? Do they fit into the budget? Maybe they don't. You can't use them anymore. Or maybe you got them before you made the budget so you can build them into the budget. We can work those ways too. And then, Gondola we also use, like if I'm in a market like Indianapolis, which is NBA All-Star, I don't have anybody that I have on my list, in Indianapolis, just because it's a smaller market. I mean, they don't even have like a rental house. Like they really don't have like a video market there. So I'll look on Gondola to see like who might be around, who works at universities and maybe is a little bit younger, but like can do, real-time editing and stuff like that. So a split between that. And then sometimes we use Production Hub too. If you want someone who's a little bit more of a higher caliber and you don't know, we've done that before. Recommendations is the other thing. I'll ask somebody I like, hey, do you like anybody else?
Typically, are you waiting till you finalize the budget before you're reaching out to these people?
It depends. If we know the client or we know the event and we've done it before, I'll reach out before the budget is approved or before that happens. But sometimes we have to wait because we're like, we really don't know if this is going to happen. And if there's a long lead time, we have the time. If we don't have a long lead time, I'll start to get like soft holds on people's calendar. Like, hey, this isn't approved, but are you available? Can you put a soft hold on it? And they will. And if something comes up, between that and the approval process, they'll let me know. And it normally doesn't happen, but so a little bit of both, depending on the event and the timing.
So we have a pitch that's been pitched and they like a concept. We have a budget finalized. What comes next in the pre-production process? How are we actually getting this to production?
Yeah. Team effort. Once budget is approved, especially if there's set fabrication, that's the first thing that needs to be finalized because that's the thing that needs the most time. So Audrey she's already reached out to people like in that pre-pro process. We're trying to find a number before the budget's finalized. We need to get a number. So she's already reached out to people. Like I've reached out to contractors. She's reached out to vendors to get a number. And so once we're approved, she'll give them the green light and we'll get mocks finalized. And they'll just like start building and hopefully we'll be a go. And then I lock in final creators. I lock in lighting schemes. I talk to AJ, like what lighting do we want to do? Here's the budget that I have. Sometimes that happens before the budget is finalized if it's a bigger shoot. But if it's something that we kind of know, I'm like, all right, I know about how much I need. So he'll kind of get a lighting scheme together. Then I'll go to a rental house, find a rental house, a local rental house. You need C-stands, you need grip gear. Sometimes we travel with lights, sometimes we don't. You're just finalizing logistics again. Like for a big event, there's lots of logistics like load in information and load out. Like, I just went back and forth maybe over 20 emails with NBA to finalize our 2 load-in because we have 2 load-ins and 2 load-outs back to back that are all at different times, different places, need different approvals, credentials, submitting names for credentials. It's everything that, so when you show up, you can pick up your credential. You've got your lights. You've got your rental car. Your staff is ready to go. We make call sheets, so everybody knows where they need to be. You're picking up the lights. You're loading in, you know, it's just like all those things. You need to line them up before you get there.
As a producer, is a lot of that like on your plate? That's your job?
Yeah. Anything that's not like set fabrication is not, it used to be before Audrey got here. We used to do that too. And it was a lot, which is why we have Audrey, because it really stretched us thin, especially in this event season. So if it's not graphics, if it's not concepting and it's not set fabrication, we're doing that other than like, and then Phoebe does logistics, but like we typically find all that stuff. So like I'll send her my flight. Like I find the flight that makes sense for me to fly, screenshot it, send it to her. Hey, I need a minivan. Like we obviously, I've talked about this before, but we use Asana. And so we have a lot of checks to go through to be like, did I do this? Did I do this? Assign this to this person, assign this. So we're going through and project managing, making sure all the information is there. So if somebody else came into this project, they could kind of see what's happening. Like if you popped in, you'd be like, oh, okay, this is the date. This is what, okay, here's the brief. Okay, here's the pit. Like you could kind of look in and get a sense of it.
Yeah. And then maybe not less for this NHL project, but then are you often contacting crew at that point and like getting everyone prepped and ready?
Yeah, scheduling a pre-production call. You'll get like rates locked in, make sure contracts are sent out. That's like a big thing that we need to get done soon because it takes a long time sometimes to get contracts signed. So getting contracts locked in, and then getting a call together to talk to your crew and make sure everybody understands what they need, what they're bringing. Do they need to rent anything? What gear do they have? Oh, they have a Sony, like we have a Red. So like, what are we going to do? Are they going to rent a Red or are we going to rent a Sony? So it's like figuring out what gear we want to use, who has what, so who brings what. You're trying to find the best deals, right? Like ultimately our job is to do the best production for the least cost.
Yeah.
Both for us as a production company to make money, but also for our clients so that they get the best deal. And we do that by all of these different things, like finding the best way to do this. So it's not like we're always renting everything. Sometimes we bring stuff. Sometimes we ship stuff. Sometimes we Amazon stuff to a warehouse. It's like where all the pieces fit together for the least amount of cost.
And then taking it back to NHL All-Star, how are you getting an ice throne to Toronto?
So yeah, that's Audrey. Audrey finds local vendors. So like we do, most of our shoots are traveling. So we typically find a vendor in the city. So she found like 2 ice throne people. And then again, you negotiate, you're trying to find the best cost, who's like, they both have good portfolios, and then who will give us the best price. And then you go with them. So she found an ice throne, ice people who make ice sculptures. And we went back and forth with them on mocks, and they were like, this is what we can do. This is what we can't do. What do we do about the drip? Like it melts and we're in an event, like, and there's people sitting on it. So like, we can't have them sit on it and it be wet. So like, what are we going to do about that? So Audrey is like figuring some of that stuff out. Like, oh, can we put acrylic down there? Do we put furs? Like, do we need other props? Do we want snow? Do we want, what's the backdrop? Also, like, we're in an event space. The last throne we did was in like a dark room, so we didn't need a set, but this time we needed a set. So you're finding separate fabricators for that, because there's the ice people and then there's the set people. So she's doing all of that and like confirming with me too. Is this what they like? Does this look good? Like size wise, she's asking me questions. I'm asking her questions. How much room do we have? Like, how tall should it be? And then I'm like, wait, they have to step up on it. So like with my experience with production and athletes and stuff, I'm like, it's safety. It's like, it's a melting throne and they have to step up on this acrylic. Like, that sounds really slippery. Like, is that going to be a problem? So then we're asking the fabricator, is that going to be a problem? And they're like, oh no, you'll have this amount of space. You'll have this, and so it's kind of all of those things. Like we're all checking in with each other on like, what's the status of this? How quickly can they build it? Oh, they have to be out in an hour. Is that possible? There's just all these things that are coming in from our client that we have to relay internally and then externally and then relay back, So it's just lots of communication.
A lot of talking. A lot of emails, really.
My communication degree comes in really handy.
Yeah. And then I know, because I've seen a few behind the scenes videos, but then you're on set and then you're also helping fabrication sometimes as well. Yeah.
So sometimes we did this more before. We should do more. But there's been times like WNBA draft, Alana and I went and we like put all the tiles on the wall. Like we had somebody build the wall, but like, again, budget constraints. It's like having them do the labor was so much more money than us just standing, and we just stand and watch them do it. Yeah. And they're just peel and stick. So it took forever, but like Alana and I were there anyway. So we're like, we'll just do it. So sometimes, we'll do part of the set build if it's feasible, or like for NHL All-Star, I had to make the snow. So like I'm making snow, I'm stirring up the snow, and then I'm, and then the snow was a little slippery. So we had to I was like, oh shoot, okay, now we have to like clear. We ended up having to cut off their feet a little bit because it was too slippery. And so we had to make sure, again, melting throne, slippery, fake snow. It was like I was like, nah, this is scary. So we had to like clear it off, and I would dry it in between, the players come and stuff. So you're also like tending to the set, because once the fabricators come, they go. So you're in charge of like quality control of like, does everything look good?
Nice. Well, Avalon, thank you for talking about pre-production. And next we're going to talk to Drew Marsh about production. And we're with Drew. Drew, I just talked to Avalon about pre-production. And now I would love to talk to you about production, boots on the ground kind of stuff.
Love it.
I know you were recently in Orlando for a shoot for the Pro Bowl with NFLPA, and I would love to talk to you about that. But briefly, can you kind of describe like what that project was before we get into it?
Yeah. So as of, I believe 2 years ago, I want to check on that. But a couple of years ago, the way that the voting goes for the Pro Bowl, if you're not familiar with the Pro Bowl is, it's the week before Super Bowl week. They award certain players in the league an all-pro honor based off their performance that season. And the format has recently changed to where now the players are the ones who vote on that. So the players who are going up against each other actually have a say in who is truly an all-pro rather than like just the media and the fans. While that vote's important, they're not the ones competing on the field every day. So the NFLPA started a new way for the voting format. And we got to just do short little interviews with the all-pro players and ask them how it felt to be named all-pro and kind of dive deep into why this new format is more special, I guess you could say, to them. Yeah, got to have a little fun with some Super Bowl predictions as well. But it was a lot of fun. Just a short little interview.
Yeah. So what are some of the first things you do when you arrive in Orlando? And then what does kind of the flow of the day look like? We can talk specifically about Pro Bowl.
Yeah. I mean, it varies on every project. It varies if you have a set build and there's a whole load-in component to it where you're working with the fabricators on making sure that they're at the right loading dock at the right time and seeing if, you know, they can get up through the freight elevator and which hallways, and making sure that that's something you do in pre-production, is kind of making sure that every logistical element you can think of is well thought out before, so that when you do get there, loading in and setting up for the shoot is a lot easier.
Nice. So was there anything, walk us through making it to Orlando. What are you doing?
So ahead of the shoot, I'll have a call with our production team just to kind of make sure we're all on the same page about everything as far as camera position, lenses being used, how we want the shots to look, how we want the edits to look. So just kind of making sure I'm all good on that. Like on the plane over, I'll be looking at our call sheet that we put together, and making sure all the details are there, making sure everyone knows what needs to be done. And when we get to Orlando for this shoot specifically, we went more minimal route with the set build. We just did a seamless backdrop. We put a little rug and table and chair to give it a little bit of flavor. But yeah, we had all of the items delivered there thanks to Audrey, our production designer, kind of got all that coordinated. So when I got there, I was able to just go through what we ordered and put it all to the side, make sure we had everything. And then the next morning, started to set everything up.
Nice. And so it's the next day. Players are coming in. How does that kind of work? Is it one at a time? They're coming in groups? Like how? Yeah,
there's a lot of different factors that go into like choosing when you set up. There's a lot of shoots that are super complex and you need a full day before, and you fly in even the day before that. For this one, with it being in Orlando and the timing of when players were coming through, we decided it was best to do just an earlier call time because it wasn't too much to set up that day. We set up in the morning, had a little bit of a buffer time until the shoot. So I believe we had everyone get there around 7:30 in the morning. We had a quick meeting just to go over what the plan was, who should be setting up what, just so we can have a nice, easy flow of the setup process. And yeah, we got the seamless up. We got the chairs and table and rug positioned where we wanted it. Got our lights set up and our cameras positioned.
Nice. And so the players arrive. Are you directing them in what they want to do? How do they know what to do? How is that once a player arrives? How are you taking it from there?
Yeah, so for this, we didn't have like a specific schedule per se. It was really flexible, just the way it was working at the hotel. This was kind of more like downtime. There were other spots at the hotel for players to participate in certain activations with like the NFL or with other sponsors. But for the NFLPA specifically, someone from their team was kind of guiding them around this little circuit, if you will. And they would bring them in. Cassidy, our client contact at the NFLPA, would kind of give them a small brief of what we were doing in there. And then from there, I would introduce myself and the team would introduce themselves. And we'd sit them down, get them mic'd up, and just talk them through what we're going to be doing. And that's pretty much it. And we just go from there.
Nice. And I have to ask, how was it meeting Jason Kelce?
It was great. It was really cool, just given all the hype around the Kelce family, and he was in his full like dad mode outfit. A lot of the players had like their families there, and that's like a big attraction to coming to Pro Bowl, is being able to bring your families. And they do a lot with, you know, Universal or Disney and with the theme parks and things like that to make it family friendly. But he was in his full
He was in flip flops.
Yeah, he had the flip flops. He was like complete Florida dad mode vacation. Like it was awesome. He was super nice, and he was super easy to work with. Super great guy.
Yeah, and this was post him announcing his retirement, right?
Yeah. So
awesome. And you mentioned it a few times, but there were other people on set helping you out. Let's talk about NFLPA. Who else was on this set, and like what were their roles?
Yeah, again, like everything kind of varies on the shoot, right? It depends on location, budget. I mean, there's so many different factors that go into like how we want to staff the shoot, especially from like a technical standpoint. But for this shoot specifically, we had myself as the producer director. We had Patrick and Jordan J Chat as our videographers. So we had a 2-camera setup. We had Lawrence on audio, and we had Christina as a real-time editor. And that was our crew.
Nice. And how are you making sure that they all know what they need to do? Is that during pre-production you're on a phone call with them? Is it when you all arrive in Orlando, you're having like a little powwow before? How does everyone know what they need to do?
Yeah, I think for all of us, I really want to make sure that going into it, everybody knows exactly what their role is from start to finish, from the minute they get in their car to come meet us on set to the minute that they get home. As far as anything logistically, from where to park, if you need to valet or not, like how you're going to get your gear through the hotel, because sometimes you can't just bring it through the lobby, where you're going to pick up your credential. So I want to make sure that in the pre-production process, we have a call or two to kind of just go over every single step of the way, from the logistics of getting there, the logistics of setting up your gear, the logistics of the production itself, and getting all wrapped up and packed up and going home.
Nice. And I understand this NFLPA shoot was a live edit. Can you kind of explain like what a live edit is?
Yeah. So a lot of times in certain event specific environments, clients want to do their best to get some of the edits out in real time, whether that be real time, like right after, or real time within like an hour or two, or real time just by end of day. It kind of just fluctuates, but it makes it a lot easier to have an editor on site who's not only getting the editing done as soon as the stuff is shot, but also like being in the room with us to kind of like listen in on the interviews. So that way, when they do get cards dropped and everything kind of transferred over, they kind of know exactly where to go.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a nice, it's fun to do because it's so quick, and you get to kind of see the final product sooner, which is a lot of fun. And it's a lot easier when you're doing it for things that are much more like structured.
Yeah. Logistically though, how does that kind of work? Are you like pulling cards after every athlete goes through and then handing off to the editor? Are they in like a separate room? You mentioned this one but typically how does the kind of process when it is a live edit play out?
Yeah, I think it's kind of up to our discretion as far as like what the flow of the players coming in is like. For this, there was a base schedule, I guess you could say, of when we were anticipating certain players to come through. A lot of times they would just show up earlier. A lot of times they would show up 4 hours late. A lot of times they would just show up the next day. So as far as just being flexible for that, we kind of just used our best judgment of coordinating with Cassidy and with the NFLPA and their team, like making sure that we may not have someone coming through for the next 10 minutes. We'll go ahead and just start dropping cards. That way, even though we don't have everybody for the compilation we were looking to get the edit for at the end of the day, we were at least able to like get them cut up and start, so that when we do get those final guys off that card, we're pretty much just plugging and playing from there, and that it's almost done.
Yeah, because for this shoot, it was less individual deliverables and it was like day compilations, right? Yeah.
Right. It was more so we asked the guys the same 5 questions for every single All-Pro player, and then we're just looking to compile them and get them out quickly.
Nice. And then extrapolating a little bit, kind of taking...
Extrapolating.
Yeah, you like that word?
I like it.
Taking a kind of a broader perspective. Is there anything you think people don't tend to think about when it comes to working on set? Anything that you feel like maybe when you're working with new freelancers that they tend to have like oversight on certain areas?
Yeah, I think it's like, I mean, the logistics is one thing. Like you think of being on set, you think you just kind of show up, set up your gear and shoot. There's so many little factors that you have to think of ahead of time to make sure you're set up for success when you get there. Not to say you're going to run into things when you are on set, but ahead of time, just making sure like you know what room you're going to be in. If you have a set build, making sure that you know the specs of the set, the specs of the room, so that you know how much depth you have to like place the cameras and what lenses you're going to need to be using. And, oh, can we block out the light? Like, are there shades built into the windows that we could lower so that we don't have to use like a gaffer to help us block out the windows for the sun coming in? Is there going to be music playing next door? Are we going to have controls of like the lighting? Are we going to have full control? Are we going to have all the power that we need in the room? So it's a lot of just making sure that you have those things communicated and figured out ahead of time with the client, with the hotel, and whoever it needs to be, to make sure that you're set up for the most success. So there's a lot of logistics that go into it, not just kind of showing up and getting to work.
Yeah, and read the call sheet.
Read
the call sheet.
The call sheet's always changing, but it's, I mean, everything that you'll need to know on our shoot is most likely on that call sheet.
Typically, how far in advance are you making the call sheet? I know you said it changes, but
yeah, it kind of depends as you get information. Like we have a template that we'll fill out. I love a good call sheet. I love to color code it based off like the client, just make it look cool.
Yeah.
That's just a personal thing. But I like to make it at least the template ahead of time. That way I could just kind of fill in the information from there. But the call sheet tells you everything from everybody's contact info to what cameras we're using, how they're positioned, what lenses, what settings they need to be in, who the fabricators are, who the client contact is, what the weather is, what meals we're having, when we're having them, schedule for the day. It has everything.
Nice. And then last question, do you have any advice for people who are trying to get on these types of sets?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of it is just posting your work. We work in so many different markets, but I would say the most important thing to do, little plug here for Gondola, but updating your Gondola. Because one of the first places I go to when I'm sourcing creators for a shoot in all different markets is going to Gondola, seeing who's out there, and I can see their work right there, and it's great. So updating your work, and then just reach out to us if you're interested too. Like we love the people that we work with. I think that's like such a foundation of like what this company is all about. So it's like always open to connecting and networking with other creators.
Nice. Well, Drew, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. This was awesome.
And we're back with Ethan Lean. Ethan, I've talked to Avalon about pre-production, Drew about production, and now I would love to talk to you about post-production because, of course, you are our post-production supervisor.
Indeed.
Yes.
Thank you for having me.
I know some of our best post-production projects are a little bit like under NDAs, kind of sneaky. We can't super talk about them, but we'll skirt around it a little bit, give some like vague sentiments about the awesome stuff you do, because I know you do some super awesome stuff. But first thing I wanted to ask is, as post-production supervisor, how early do you find yourself getting into the process of a project?
I mean, it definitely depends on the project itself, but I like to be in as early as possible just to understand kind of what the vibe of what we're looking for is. And I also think it can really help us to understand how things are going to come together in the edit during the shoot too. So I like to come in a lot earlier in the process than maybe some other people. Like during pre-production, I think is a great point of like talking about what we're going to need on that back end, right? Are we going to need a larger post team of like colorists and motion designers and VFX artists and just regular editors and sound mixers? Like if we can know that up front, then we can prepare on set of what we're actually shooting for. And that's a big help when you're doing like VFX or like big motion graphics integrations.
Nice. And I would love to talk a bit more about editing, because I know you're an editing god and won an Emmy for editing. And I need you to tell me about that really quick before I move on. You won an Emmy for editing.
I did. It's a Heartland Regional Emmy, but an Emmy nonetheless.
Hell yeah.
I edited I think it was a long form promotional spot. Like that was the actual category. But I did a long form promotional spot for a nonprofit here in Denver. And one day they called me up and they're like, hey, we're going to submit for an Emmy. And I was like, okay, cool. That's exciting. Next thing I know, I'm at the gala and won for this like project that I was really, really passionate about and excited about, and like donated my time to, work on and give back to this charity. And yeah, it was really cool. So very exciting, big accomplishment for a how old was I? Like 23.
Hell yeah.
Yeah,
Not
kinda
many
crazy.
23-year-olds have Emmys.
So I hear.
Or maybe all of them do besides me.
Yeah.
But I know you tend to edit or work or supervise a lot of different styles of projects when it comes to like media days or narrative projects or even music videos. I know you do a lot of those.
Totally.
How do you kind of adjust your mind to approach these different styles of videos?
That's a really good question. I think it's all about like feeling, right? And I hate to like throw it around, but like there is a vibe attached to all of those. And they're all very different, right? Especially like social content to music videos to narrative work, all very different vibes and tones and things that you have to think about. But I all think that they each flex this like muscle in my brain that the other one doesn't do. Like social content, I get to be really like fun and punchy and quick and do like kind of weird stuff. And some of that carries over into music videos of like, I can be really weird and weirder than I can be with social, I think in a lot of ways, because, you know, we're editing for clients and they have a very consistent brand and those limitations are helpful. And the narrative stuff is like all about pacing and you're getting less weird with it. And you're just making sure that you don't see the edits, right? Like narrative is a tough one because like long form narrative or even like short film kind of stuff. The moment the audience sees the edit, you failed as an editor.
Yeah.
And you don't want that. Like, especially in narrative, it's like the editing should just feel like a part of the story and we're not watching an edit. Whereas with social content, it's like, I'm here to watch this like cool edit.
The edit
for
is
the
obvious.
NBA.
Like,
yeah,
I feel like with social content, people literally comment like, this edit was fire.
exactly.
Like, yeah.
But nobody's doing that on the new Spielberg movie.
Yeah.
Like, man, dude, they went crazy on Ready Player One over here. Like, we'll talk about VFX and that's like very different. But yeah, editing is like sort of this like huge part of the process, right? I always think that like a good editor can turn really bad footage into a really great final product, but a really bad editor can take great footage, the best footage you've ever seen, and make it into a really bad final product. And so I think editing is just like this like really important part of the finishing process that I think sometimes gets really overlooked.
Yeah. Oftentimes I find myself telling the story in the edit. Like we'll have, for context, I edit like most of the stuff that comes out on Fresh Tape's internal channels. And I'll just get like a jumble of clips at the very end of just like Avalon kicking ass in some random shoot somewhere in like Iowa or something. Yeah. And then I'm like, okay, let's make this coherent somehow. But yeah, the power of editing is so cool. But I wanted to ask you, because I know you work with a lot of freelancers and contractors as well. When do you find yourself on the keys versus deciding to delegate? Is it always just a budget thing, or are there any particular reasons why?
Yeah, I think budget is a big one. I think there are like 3 reasons, and it's budget, time, and creative or style. Like time specifically is like sometimes we get projects that we need a version 1 or a final even like due the next day. And it's just too much to like find an editor, get them the footage, introduce them to the project, get them on like the vibe and the creative direction, all within like what is essentially 20 hours. Like that's a lot. So that time is a big one. Budget is another one of like, do we have budget to go out of house with this? Or is it like, is this something that I even want to do? Right. And then finally, like creative, like I am not the best editor in the world. I think there are obviously people who are a lot better than me at stuff. And I love learning from those people. And there are just certain kinds of edits or styles of edits that are definitely not my specialty, but are somebody's, right? And that's what the client wants. And I love just like throwing stuff to those people who kick ass and like do cool shit. Like I love working with those people. And any time that I can hire somebody who's like a really, really great editor at, you know, this very specific like niche style, I always will go with them.
Yeah, especially a lot of stuff we do, it feels like there's 20, 30, 40 deliverables required. And then just like for that to all come from one person is just...
That's a lot.
Yeah. I
mean, we're doing a secret project for a secret client right now that has 1,090 total deliverables.
Jesus.
In the post team on that is going to end up being 15, 16 people. That's a lot.
What is it like when you have a team that big? I can like understand working with, 2 or 3 editors, but when you have a post team, how do you even manage that all?
Yeah. You see, have you seen Oppenheimer?
Yeah.
It's kind of like, it's the separation that really helps, where they can't communicate with each other, like the scientists. It's like that. It's like, if I could put one editor on one, so this project in particular has like a bunch of different series within it, right? Different styles. And so if I can get one editor who's really good at this style on just this series, then I can keep them cohesive across all the edits, right? And so then it's easier for me to track, like, okay, this person's working on this series, instead of being like, they're working on deliverables 23, 42, and 66.
Yeah.
And that just makes it a lot easier. And with this project in particular, it's like we have editors, and then we have separate colorists, separate motion designers, and separate audio mixers. And so it's like making sure that everything gets down the chain properly is like really tough, but the separation is like what helps. If we can keep it dedicated to certain things, or like categorize it better with those people, it definitely makes it easier.
Yeah, I would love to talk a bit about how we structure our edits, because you came up with this whole system of this like proper post workflow.
Yeah.
And I want you to just tell all. What is the system?
Oh man, we're giving out all the secrets. Huh?
Yeah, trade secrets.
Okay. Yeah, no, so the way we structure our edits and our version tracking, I don't know if is like the industry standard, but it really works for us in our workflow. And we put a big emphasis on internal quality control. Like, we're never just going to take the edit from the freelancer and give it right to the client. So with that comes lots and lots and lots and lots of exports and versions. So we start with a version 0, which is essentially a internal facing only version. It's kind of like a gut check of like, this is not a very polished edit, but are we on the right track to get to that polished edit? I think it's a great halfway point. And then from there we do 0.5. And that's just another internal QC, making sure that everything's looking good. And usually that's just like, this could be a V1, but we want to give ourselves a little bit of padding for a V1. So then from there we go V1, and then we do like version 0.5 in between every version. This is like super exciting stuff, right? Version tracking. But yeah, it's like really important for us to do that internal QC. So we split up our version tracking, and then we use these beautiful, beautiful spreadsheets that tell us exactly what deliverable name we're on, that auto populates, and the editors can look at that and see where they're at. I can see where the editors are at, especially when I'm managing like 1 billion projects at a time. And
we kind of bake into our budgets and contracts like how many revisions there are, right?
Yeah.
That scales like with contracts and size.
Yeah. So we allow for 2 revisions at any given time. I mean, like, that's our standard, but like that gets messy. And even in my freelancing work before I worked at Fresh Tape, like it gets messy in the sense that like, well, I made a mistake in this edit.
Yeah.
And nobody, in the internal QC rounds didn't catch this like black frame, right? Well, we're not going to count that as a version because I fucked up.
Yeah.
Or because I made a mistake. It gets messy, but we do our best to like stay to those 2 revisions, and we kind of work with the client if we go over or need to go over based on their feedback.
Nice. And I know you mentioned that you work with a huge team of freelancers and contract editors. Do you want to shout any of them out? Give them any special attention?
Yeah, is this a direct to camera moment?
It could be.
Amadeus Bennett. He's probably one of the best editors we have, and he makes great edits. He's always on time. And he's just a homie. He's a good dude. We went to film school together, so maybe I'm a little biased, but he does a lot of our edits. And even before I worked here, like, he crushes. Dude is the best. Amadeus Bennett.
For people that are interested in maybe becoming a freelance editor themselves, or maybe working with you one day, do you have any advice for how they get there?
Like somebody who hasn't edited before and wants to become an editor, or somebody who's an established editor already?
Maybe someone who is, like they have been editing for a while, but maybe not professionally yet, but they want to become a freelance editor. and become someone that maybe we Fresh Tape hire someday?
Okay. I think spec work is huge. I am a big fan of spec work. If you want to do edits for the NBA or the NFL, go rip a bunch of game footage off YouTube and practice editing, right? Like, if maybe you've been editing for a long time but have never been able to do that kind of work, go rip an hour of NFL highlights off YouTube and cut it together in your style. And don't, put it on your website and say, this is spec work, obviously, right? Don't be like, I worked with the NFL. Don't do that. But advertise it as spec work, as this was a test of what I can do. And I think that's huge. I really respect spec work because that should be the time where, as a creator or an editor, you're going crazy. Show off your style, do something new, do something weird and creative and fun. So that's how to get into it. And then gondola jobs, right? Or even just reaching out to, you could reach out to me on Instagram if you want. You can shoot me an email. I think spec work is huge. Send it to me, send it to my email, send it to people that you want to work with and just be like, hey, I did this spec edit and I would love to do something like this for real in the future. So in conjunction with that, what do I look for in editors? I think the two biggest things I'm looking for is pacing. Pacing is huge in all of editing. All of editing is pacing, right? And that might be sync to the music, or how the music integrates with your cut and how cohesive those two feel together in a single edit. But I also look for swag. Not them as a person, but does your edit make me feel cool? That's what I'm looking for. And obviously that's not how it is for all projects, but when I see somebody who their work stands out and I'm like, fuck, that's cool. That's got some swagger to it.
It shows people going above and beyond.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are the things that I look for. Is is there that pacing of things feel good. I'm not feeling I'm rushed from one moment to the next. Just they're weird technical flaws. I want some swag in your edit. I want some style. And I want to see an injection of your style into it, right? I think in my own edits and stuff I do for our clients, there is my vibe in it. Even when it's the longer interview stuff, the way I cut that is different than I think some of our other contractors would cut that. And I want to see your style and your voice in those edits, because I don't want to hire just a robot to do it. I'm not getting AI to chop it up, which for the Autopod is great.
Yeah.
Autopod is awesome. It's perfect for that. But it'll never be to a point where you can just throw in a bunch of footage and it'll make these cool effects and transitions and these moments, right? And so that's what I'm looking for. I want somebody with a voice and style and swag.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, Ethan, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
And now we're back with Avalon for creator shoutouts, where each week we shout out creators we truly admire. Avalon, is there a creator you want to shout out today?
Yes. I would like to shout out Juan Morales.
Yes.
He was my partner on the NHL shoot, and we did this last year for the first time, a kind of combo, just attack this thing together. I directed and he shot, and it just worked so well, and we just love working together. So he did an amazing job in the edit, in the shooting. And yeah, I just love working with him. He's super talented.
Nice. And I would love to shout out Harrison Green. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's a freelance videographer who used to work with the UFC as their main social person. But he has been absolutely crushing it on Instagram lately. He's been doing all of these. It started as these spec ads for energy drinks and stuff. And then that led to actual shoots and stuff. But the way he does behind the scenes is goals for me. It's just
awesome.
Amazing. So Harrison, if you ever want to get on the podcast, let me know.
Juan, you too.
And if any of you watching want a chance to be featured on our show, just make sure to drop your gondola link in the comments. Avalon, thank you so much. And of course, thanks Ethan and Drew for coming on. But Avalon, as we say at the end of every episode,
That's a wrap.
That's a wrap.